Well, hello and welcome once again to Beat the Reset. My name is Tim and I am the guy in the hat. And today I am talking with my very good friend and associate, Bisher from Stormrake. How are you, Bish?
I'm doing well, my man. It's always good to have a chat with yourself and good to see you.
Likewise. And we're sharing a coffee and we're having a casual chat today. But the chat that we're having today is what I believe an incredibly important education session for people at Beat the Reset. Now, Beat the Reset is largely commodities, gold and silver. However, we've recently onboarded an incredible crypto broker at Stormrake in Melbourne, and Bisher is the man to tell us all about it. So, Bisher, I want to start off with the question, who are you and what do you do and why do you do it? Tell us who Bisher is.
Yeah, awesome. So really simply, my journey started in foreign exchange, so trading worthless fiat currencies for each other. That's how I actually got to come across Sam over at Adams Bullion. We shared an FX trading desk back in the day, and that's what I did for about 5 years. And I was always chasing volatility, and I was looking at, really exotic foreign exchange pairs. We were trading, Polish zloty, South African rand, Russian rubles, just some crazy currency pairs that you don't usually hear about in everyday terms. But what I got introduced to in 2016 was Bitcoin. On one of the forums, I was chasing volatility. So, of course, Bitcoin came up in that conversation on the old internet forums. And then I fell in love with the asset class shortly after, discovering its monetary value, the fact that it's a pristine monetary and neutral monetary network. So I started being able to invest quite heavily into it, and then I moved into the crypto space in 2019 as a professional. So moving across from FX brokerage to crypto brokerage.
Okay, so and you've moved across now to a company called Stormrake.
That's right.
And before we get into the all about Bitcoin, because people are dying to know about Bitcoin, and what is Stormrake, just so we can understand that?
Stormrake is a full-service cryptocurrency broker. So the way we like to explain it is we're an old world service for a new world asset class. So the way you can trade with us is by simply picking up the phone, dropping us an email. You'll get a personal relationship with your broker to work with, almost as if you're buying bullion in store or in the shop. You literally can come in, have a chat with us, can do it in person, over the phone. But it doesn't matter where you are in the country, we can look after you.
Absolutely. And I love what you said, this old world meets new world. Isn't that fantastic? Right. And I actually do believe that you have achieved that. That has certainly been not only my experience, but certainly a lot of my clients. They're very happy with Stormrake. And not just your knowledge, but how you deal with people. This is a people business still, isn't it interesting?
Correct.
Okay, so let's get into the Bitcoin question. Now, this is an anomaly on my channel. A lot of people have a mate that tells them to buy Bitcoin. My mate told me to get it, right? But you guys don't that's not how you guys function. Obviously, you know a little bit more than the guy at the pub. After the global financial crisis of 2007, 2008, suddenly we see this brand new technology appear called Bitcoin. And at first, no one seemed to notice it. And then tell us what happened and what is it? So let's just pretend we've gone in a time machine back to 2009. We've got this asset called Bitcoin. Here we are in 2024. What happened? Why did it become so popular? And why does it do what it do? And how does it do what it does? Over to you.
Incredible. So I'm break it down in 3 parts. First, what is Bitcoin? How it works, and then why Bitcoin, which is what everybody is here to understand. So I'll keep the what and the how very, very brief. So what Bitcoin is, it's purely a monetary network, right? And that's Bitcoin with a capital B. That's the network in which moves Bitcoin with a little b around. So you could think of Bitcoin, the currency that you invest in, as a commodity asset. And then you can think of Bitcoin with the capital B as a monetary network, something similar to SWIFT, right? So the way it communicates, though, the information around what is receiving, what is sending, that's done by, you hear this buzzword called decentralized. And I'm not trying to ram you guys with a bunch of unnecessary terminology, but all that it means is that it's not up to me or Tim to process the transaction, right? It goes out to a bunch of computers spread across the globe. There's computers in the Middle East, computers in Africa, computers in Europe, Asia, that are all reaching consensus and confirming transactions that are being sent. The beauty of that, taking away all the buzzwords, taking away all the jargon, is that it comes down to the fact that it is a neutral monetary network. I can move $1 million, $1 billion, $1 for the same amount of cost, and there is no restrictions on who can receive it and where I can send it to. That is truly the most groundbreaking technology we've had in this century. Because if you look at going into the banks, and in fact I challenge everybody who's listening to this, go to your local bank branch, whoever you're with, and try to withdraw $1,000. Just give it a go. See what happens. You will not be able to get that $1,000 out, not without a probe of questions about what you're planning on doing with it. There's not a single question that's asked when you're sending $1, $1,000, $1 million worth of Bitcoin. So what it is, it's a monetary network with an asset that moves across it, and the asset that represents the value being moved is Bitcoin, which is what you invest in. That's what you come to me to buy or sell or swap, depending on what you're looking to do. How it all works, that's actually not really pertinent to the conversation, because if you look at your smartphone, you don't know how it works, yet you use it. The combustion engine, 99.9% of people do not know how the combustion engine works, yet they get into the car every single day, press on the gas, hopefully in a safe and responsible way, and they use their car without any issues. So how it works doesn't really matter. What you do need to know is that it does work. That's all that you need to know, right? And then you can get stuck into the technology and the weeds and everything over time, right? But don't let that stop you from making an investment. Why Bitcoin is really simple. I come from a part of the world where Bitcoin is not just an investment, but absolutely necessary. So back in my grandmother's time, I come from a part of the world called Lebanon, and it used to, $1 used to get you 3 Lebanese pounds. This is back in my grandmother's time. So pretty reasonable, right? Nothing too crazy. And this is when Beirut was known as the Paris of the Middle East. Now, $1 gets you over 150,000 Lebanese pounds. So if somebody wants to go and get $20 worth of petrol, they need to go and spend 1.5 million Lebanese pounds to get, a couple of liters of petrol to get their daihatsu working, right? That is hyperinflation that affects 99.9% of currencies in the world, and is the fate of 100% of all fiat currencies will experience hyperinflation. That will come to the Aussie dollar, that will come to the US dollar, euro. It's just a matter of time, and it's an inevitability. So why Bitcoin is that it is the most secure way outside of gold to actually hedge against inflation and have a neutral money that you can spend and save in without having to worry about monetary debasement. So that's why Bitcoin.
It's interesting, when I think about the power of Bitcoin, and I've learned a lot from Stormrake and yourself particularly. The Bank for International Settlements in 2019 added, for the first time in many years, a third tier 1 asset to the pool. And there's the US dollar, US treasuries, and physical gold. Mm-hmm. I guess this is a bit of a sort of a speculative question. So I'm just going to ask your opinion. This is an opinion question. But could you ever see a world where Bitcoin was classified as a tier 1 asset, in other words, a stabling asset for the central bank system? So the whole purpose of these tier 1 assets is to act as stabilizing assets. In other words, so they've got something of actual value on their books. Could you imagine a world? I mean, I'm not even sure if Bitcoin could do it, but it seems to me to have all the hallmarks of a tier 1 asset. I don't know. Could you ever imagine that a world where that could be the case?
I don't have to imagine it. I am within near 100% confidence and certainty that it's inevitable. And the reason why I say that, and I'd be more than happy to answer any other questions that come off the back of that level of certainty, is that for me, it's just as a neutral monetary network, and you're seeing everything that's going on with BRICS, the fact that the US seized Russia's foreign exchange reserves at the breakout of the Russia-Ukraine war. Yeah. That was the first in history that had ever occurred. Even when the Germans and the Brits were completely destroying each other in the Battle of the Somme, the Germans had money inside inside British banks that was not touched. So the fact that this is the first time in history that it's occurred where another nation's currency reserves were seized has now got all of these countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and now Saudi Arabia is de-dollarizing. It will become an inevitability where central banks around the world will hold gold and Bitcoin to be able to settle amongst each other, and then that will be the sovereign wealth strategy of a lot of places. And I think that for people who want to settle international trade, Bitcoin will become an inevitability to do that, and then gold is what they'll use as their reserve asset to back their local currencies.
Yeah, that is a perfect answer. That is exactly spot on. And yes, I look, I would hesitate. I would hasten to even add something to the effect of I think the central banks are already dabbling in Bitcoin in some way, I would imagine, or if not, some very big corporations, I'd imagine. Okay, so let's get back on to great. That was a very, very good opinion. I totally underwrite everything you just said, by the way. And it also demonstrates to our audience that you've got a vision far bigger than Bitcoin. Like, you understand markets, you understand what's going on in the world. You mentioned BRICS and Saudi Arabia and the US dollar. I mean, these are big deals now. Question for you, though. So there's many cryptocurrencies, and people often ring me up and they go, well, Mr. Guy in the Hat, there's like thousands of cryptocurrencies. Where do I start? Well, what about Dolphin coin? My mate told me to get it, right? or Fluffy Rabbit coin or something. So when you're talking to a client, I guess what I want you to sort of share is when they come to you, let's pick a random number like $100,000. I've got $100,000, Bish. I don't know what to do. I'm brand new to cryptos. Can you take us through roughly how you see the world with that client and that $100,000 investment from a crypto perspective?
Yep. Majority of it will be advised to be allocated towards Bitcoin. Now, the reason why I say that is there's Bitcoins and then there's everything else, right? There's Bitcoin, then altcoins, right? Now, everything else outside of Bitcoin doesn't mean that it's a bad investment choice, but I get this notion or this idea that people think that by buying a lot of different types of cryptocurrencies, they're adding diversification. But that's not diversification. I just want to be very clear on that. So what is diversification is buying Bitcoin and then buying a commodity asset such as gold. That is true diversification because they're non-correlated and they move independently of one another. Just because Bitcoin's going up doesn't mean gold is necessarily going down. It's true non-correlated assets. Whereas if you're buying Bitcoin and then adding in a bunch of other crypto assets, thinking that you're being diversified, you're not really achieving any of that, because what happens is if Bitcoin moves up, the rest of these coins move up quite quickly. And then if Bitcoin moves down, these other altcoins will fall off a cliff, right? So everything's just following BTC's movements. So the safest thing to do is just buy Bitcoin with at least 50% or more. So my advice would be, okay, you got 100 grand. 50 grand minimum is going to go towards BTC, minimum, right? Then with the remaining balance, we can spread that across some really good opportunities because yes, there is wealth to be made in the crypto markets, but the first thing we need to do is making sure that we preserve that wealth that you've worked so hard to accumulate, and that will be working with Bitcoin. The rest we can allocate towards some MX tech, some real world assets. I think that is a huge, huge sector because tokenization is going to become a multi-trillion dollar asset class within crypto in and of itself. So you definitely want to have exposure there. But just like you think about, speculative mining shares, think of the altcoins as the same way. You can have a big hit that goes up 10, 20, 50x, 100x and give you returns that will melt your mind. And then just by the same token, then you can easily go down 50%, right? So if you over allocate towards these high risk plays, you can end up with quite a substantial drawdown. Whereas if you're basing your portfolio upon Bitcoin, you never have to worry about going to bed at night and waking up with, half of your portfolio down the shitter.
Okay. So Bitcoin, as a risk asset, where on the risk curve is it, in your opinion? So if you had to describe the risk, some assets are high risk, some assets are risk off. Where does Bitcoin sit in the risk curve, in your opinion?
It is a very high risk asset. There's no way about it, right? And now I say that being fully allocated and fully invested to Bitcoin, and I ride the volatility like a roller coaster. There's no two ways about it. It is a new technology. It is an emerging currency. It's an emerging asset class. It's only been around for 14 years. It's literally in its teenagehood right now. And any of the parents at home can understand how a teenager is, right? That's the same level of volatility that you're going to get with Bitcoin. But you've got a real star in BTC in the sense that as it matures and as it gets older, so 10 years from now, 20 years from now, Bitcoin has gone from being 14 years old to 35 years old and has had 100% uptime and has continued to work. And every day that it continues to be a successful network with no issues is adding to its maturity and it's adding to its stability. So what you pay for in the uncertainty of how it will work is the upside that you receive. So if you invested in Bitcoin 10 years ago, right, it was a very uncertain bet. Like it was highly, highly speculative. And every day that has gone by since then, you've been rewarded with more and more upside. But you can still come in whilst it's in its adolescence, be able to be rewarded with massive upside and still be able to have a lot more certainty than what an investor did 10 years ago.
My final question is related to dealing essentially with the movement of the volatility. Now, the thing about high-risk assets, I think it would be fair to say the reason a lot of people avoid high-risk assets is they can't handle the emotion. How do you handle emotion?
It's a great question, and you handle it with diversification, right? If you've got Bitcoin and gold in your portfolio, that is an all-weather portfolio that you can sit on for a really long time. So yes, you have to have the stomach for it, and that can come with time, but having to manage your emotions might mean you're actually over-allocated and over-invested into an asset that you may not know well enough about to go all in on. So I'm all in on Bitcoin. I've got like $150 in my CBA bank account. I've got nothing in there. Everything else is in Bitcoin. And whenever I need to spend local fiat currency like Aussie dollars, I sell down some of my Bitcoin reserves and I go back in, right? But I'm not advising people to do that. So if you've got like a good chunk of gold and silver that you've just safed and warehoused away, and you've got a bit of Bitcoin exposure that you can leave for some upside, then that's the best strategy you can have, because you're never going to sweat bullets over it. You're never going to lose sleep, and you can partake in one of the biggest wealth creation events in mankind's history. Mm-hmm. You get to participate in that without having to get shaken out of the trade. That's how you do it.
I love your passion, Bisher. Well, that's pretty much all we've got time for in this podcast. Your information, as usual, is delivered as we would expect. Bisher, would you come back for another podcast?
Anytime, anywhere.
Maybe we can do a few of these.
Yes,
I think
they're
going to get very popular just between you and me. Well, that's it for me. The Guy in the Hat, of course, with Bisher from Stormrake. Incredible wealth of knowledge, not just with Bitcoin, but other crypto assets as well. Great knowledge of monetary systems globally. You really do understand the state of play. So that's it for me, the Guy in the Hat, signing off on another podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this one. I hope you've got safely to your destination if you've been driving. And of course, as I always say, look after your health. That's your number one. The second, of course, and equally as important, is your family. And finally, as always, make good choices.